teachers, and thank you for listening to my presentation about doing an art integrated project in your classroom. Specifically, I am looking at your figurative language unit that you will be doing in the spring and looking at day 4, where you would typically teach a lesson on onomatopoeia, reading the book Gotcha, and having a discussion with students. I am suggesting that you continue a course that you already had, plus implementing an art project into your onomatopoeia unit in your figurative language lesson. So the reason in doing this is in my recent course, and especially in an article that we read all the way back on week 1, takes a look at how art integration to an academic subject doesn't necessarily increase the amount of learning. Students will learn things, right? If they're doing like memorization, plug and chug, flashcards the same way, but it may help them retain that information longer. And specifically, if reading and writing activities for students who are basic or below basic, by incorporating a art integrated project or lesson into their reading, it may benefit an opportunity to have them learn alternatively and then again retain those skills longer so they can transfer them in other places. So today what I'd like to talk you through are some of the process for designing an onomatopoeia word inspired by pop artist Roy Lichtenstein and demonstrated for you from an art teacher who has a wonderful YouTube videos on how to do all the steps in this instruction. So you don't have to be an art teacher in order to do this project. You'll have students learn and research what onomatopoeia is, finding examples. I want you to have them make a web map of examples of onomatopoeia in writing. They'll pick one that they're going to make as a sketch for their choice. And then finally colorize this and then present their findings that they learn into Schoology. So teachers, let me walk you through some of the standards and process of how you'd begin this work of art. So teachers, let's view some of the instructions on how you're going to use an art integrated lesson to teach onomatopoeia in your figurative language unit. So first of all, we need to remind students when we're introducing this project what an onomatopoeia is. So we'll teach them that a onomatopoeia is a word that's formed or spelled, and it's associated with its name. I like to tell students that this is a word that's spelled like how it sounds. The objective here is that students are going to identify examples of onomatopoeia in text. They're going to create and write examples of onomatopoeia. And then finally, they're going to make a work of art based on onomatopoeia so that they are learning to recognize this language strategy elsewhere outside of just books. This lesson will still suffice your ELA standards for your figurative language unit based on grade level meaning of texts. And it will also incorporate a national standard for art education, getting students to determine a message communicated by a work of art. Finally, we're going to take a look at then how students are going to begin this brainstorming process to come up with some onomatopoeia. So how do we introduce this to kids? I like to give them a hook of being a little bit of a detective. And I like to say, let's find visuals from just what you already have. So where can we find examples of onomatopoeia? Maybe students might point out they see it in superhero movies, specifically in comic books or graphic novels. I know many of our students enjoy reading these types of books full of illustrations. For example, the Dogman and Cat Kid series. And perhaps these students are going to find these works in their own desk and in their own classroom library. So this gives kids some buy-in versus a book that the teacher picks. Perfectly reasonable to read Gotcha to the students, but perhaps by having students find examples of onomatopoeia in books of their choosing, this gives them some ownership over the material. So now we're going to discuss how we're going to use onomatopoeia in the art world. And I would like students to observe the work of Roy Lichtenstein. By clicking this link here, it will take students to the Encyclopedia Britannica webpage, where it talks through some examples of how this pop artist create works of art in the 1960s and 70s using onomatopoeias and primary color. This way, students are viewing an artist that actually would go about creating these works using his onomatopoeia. So there are examples of Roy Lichtenstein's work, there are videos students can watch, and you can choose your level of engagement that you want students to look through some of his abstract paintings. Then I would come through, so now that we have found examples of onomatopoeia in our own text, and we see examples of onomatopoeia from an artist, now we need to make. So we are going to, as a class, create a web map of some words that are onomatopoeia. You could brainstorm as a group, or you could do it individually and share. But from those collections of words, ask students to pick one example that they're going to use to create their own work of art. And the way that you can teach this process of creating is by watching this artist. Her name is Sarah Karjweski, I believe she is, but she was art teacher of the year in Wisconsin, creator for the art of education. Through explaining in her pandemic videos she did during 2020 called Cool Beans Art Club, walking through what she calls a superhero word. So her example is not an onomatopoeia, but the process can be used to create an onomatopoeia. So she uses the word create, and she explains in her video, you can have students draw along with her how to create a pencil drawing of block letters, how to make them three-dimensional, how to colorize and create shape and form in her piece. And these are very similar to the pop artworks you would see from artist Roy Lichtenstein. And she does a really excellent job explaining how to make something that your students could, mirror and follow along. So after they brainstorm and make a choice, they can watch this tutorial and then have a chance to draw along with their project. Finally, after creating their work of art, we want to pair and share and assess. We want to find out as teachers, what was the big takeaway students learned from this lesson? Did they understand how to apply onomatopoeia and find it in the English language? In Schoology, I have already created a course for you teachers based on this lesson. So shared out with the third grade team is a folder called Onomatopoeia. And in it, you can find all of the things that were just in my slides. A demonstration, artist examples, the pop art images from the Google Slides, a demo I did on this lesson a few years ago, and finally a place where they can photograph their work, upload their assessment, and you can give them any questions that are allowed to modify here if you want to look for questions for confirmation or confirming that students have retained their onomatopoeia or learned what it is in figurative language. Excuse me, talking to a camera. So, third grade teachers, I would encourage you to give this figurative language lesson a chance for art integration to see if you can reach out to your students that might be basic or below basic, perhaps in reading or Ella, and see if they are using this to help them retain this new learned information, perhaps even longer, and apply it to settings outside of the Ella classroom and even into the art world. Feel free to reach out to me with email and any questions, and I'd love to even demonstrate and work along with your class. Thank you for taking the time to view and listen to my slides.